Welcome now to the forum for Texas House District 45. It is my pleasure to introduce the candidates for this race, Carrie Isaac and Aaron Zwiener, and invite them to make an opening statement. We will begin with Ms. Isaac. Ms. Isaac, can you make an opening statement, please? There you go. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Carrie Isaac. I'm running for state representative. I'm a wife and a mother to 2 teenage boys, and I've been active in our community for over 15 years. I understand that property taxes are out of control and created a burden on our working families and our seniors, and I will work to reform our property tax system. I know that small businesses are the heart of our economy, and I will work to cut regulations and red tape that make it difficult for our small businesses to thrive. We must keep our community safe. I will fight to fund border security to keep gangs, drug cartels, and human traffickers out of our communities. And I am committed to our teachers and students, and I will work to direct more money into the classroom so that our teachers and students have the best chance to excel. I will fight to protect our hill country. We must protect and utilize our natural resources wisely. And I promise you, no one will outwork me in fighting for freedoms and values important to our community and our state.
Thank you. Ms. Zwiener?
Hey, y'all, I am State Representative Aaron Zwiener, and thank y'all so much for coming out tonight and staying engaged with the electoral process. I am a freshman member of the Texas legislature, and after my freshman session, Texas Monthly referred to me as the most savvy of the freshmen and a future leader of the House Democrats. You know, I stepped up to run because I believe in my values of healthy communities, inclusivity, and common sense government. And that's not what I saw reflected in our representation here in House District 45. I helped pass an $11.6 billion education package that is funding $6.5 billion into our public schools, including pay raises for educators, funding for full day pre-K, funding for our English language learners and our special education students. That money also dropped your school district property tax rates somewhere between 7 and 11 cents, depending on your school district. Next session, I am going to go fight to expand Medicaid so that every Texan has access to affordable health care and we can all continue to afford to visit the doctor.
Thank you. Let's move on to the Q&A portion of the forum. First question. Texas is 43rd in the nation in primary health care access, highest in the number of uninsured living in our state, and has one of the highest maternal mortality rates. Would you support or introduce legislation that would give more Texans access to health care and to some form of health insurance, such as Medicaid? Please explain your answer. We'll start with Ms. Isaac.
This is an area that I am passionate about and I have a master's degree in. Patients right now are at the mercy of a shadowy system with access to little information that they need to make the best decisions about their own health care. We need more transparency. We should know how much something costs before we buy it. People should be able to shop around. If you can shop around, that causes competition, and competition drives down cost. Our healthcare system is expensive and complicated because too many third-party people have wedged themselves between our medical professionals and our patients. We need a competitive and transparent healthcare system. I want to work with the legislature to continue to support more policies that give more competition and more choices to patients. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Zwiener.
Yeah, I'm going to answer the question. Yes, I will support expanding Medicaid in the state of Texas. Price transparency is great. It's an important tool to help address rising costs of healthcare, but price transparency doesn't help someone who's having to choose between paying for a procedure and paying their mortgage. Too many Texans are one diagnosis away from bankruptcy. The biggest thing we can do tomorrow here in Texas is expand Medicaid, just like 38 other states already have done. Expanding Medicaid will cover another 1.5 million Texans, and it will bring in $10 billion of our federal income taxes back home to our state. It'll help keep rural hospitals open. It will help drive down the healthcare costs for all Texans. And it will help put us forward to have a community where everyone has access to healthcare. If we have learned anything from this COVID-19 pandemic, it's that we are all only as healthy as our sickest relative. And I want to make sure everyone has access to healthcare. Medicaid expansion is the way forward.
Thank you. What is your position on the Permian Highway natural gas pipeline project when it comes to the issue of private corporations' use of eminent domain and the environmental impact that the pipeline would create? First, Ms. Sweiner.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think it's very unfortunate that Kinder Morgan chose to locate this pipeline through the heart of the Hill Country, through the heart of House District 45. It didn't make sense. And nothing illustrated that better than the decision to try and cross under the Blanco River, not once, but twice. In my first meeting with Kinder Morgan, I pointed at that on the map and I said, why? Why would you cross the river when you can just avoid it? And I know I'm not the only one who pointed that out. Unfortunately, the company proceeded ahead. They lost thousands of gallons of drilling fluid when they hit a karst feature trying to drill under the river and muddied community members' wells, all because they didn't stop and take stock of the community and listen to the local expertise. So I will support legislation. Well, shoot, I will file legislation to create a public routing process for these large pipelines, just like we have with a road or a large electrical transmission line or a railroad. They have the power of eminent domain to take people's land. That's an incredible power that should not exist without proper transparency, oversight, and public input.
Thank you. Ms. Isaac?
Yes, I have talked to property owners who are not happy about the pipeline, and I've also met with representatives from Kinder Morgan. We spoke about the issue of low initial offers, and they agree that that process definitely needs to be reformed. Landowners should have a bigger voice in regards to easement terms. Companies should be required to meet with landowners so landowners have a bigger voice in the whole process. My opponent in the fake news media say that she fought the pipeline. She did not accomplish anything. Our Republican congressman, Chip Roy, was able to work with Kinder Morgan to get them to go around the river instead of under the river. I know how to work with people to get it done. I will be a strong voice to the residents of Hays and Blanco counties. Vote Carrie Isaac for state representative.
Thank you. Our next question, what legislative steps would you take to ensure that all Texans can fairly exercise their voting rights? Ms. Isaac?
Sorry, I had no time. Yeah, vote. You know, the process that we have here in Texas, the absentee process that we have in place works well. You ask for a ballot and you get one. I know that some states do mass bailouts. I mean, mass ballot mailouts without voters requesting it, but they've been doing this. They have processes in place that work well. I don't believe that states that have not been doing this should change this process right before an election.
Thank you, Ms. Sweiner.
Yeah, thank you for this question. I do want to say real quick that the coalition of folks, including myself, who fought the Kinder Morgan pipeline, delayed it getting into operation by a year and have laid down a flag. And I am confident that we will have dissuaded other companies from choosing to come through our beautiful hill country. I believe the right to vote is sacred, and it's something we need to protect here in Texas. Unfortunately, too many Texas laws are designed to make it harder for you to exercise your right to vote and disproportionately impact young folks and communities of color. We have to change that. The first thing we can do, allow online voter registration. I have helped register dozens of folks in the last couple of weeks, and I love doing it. And goodness, I wish they had an online form to make it easier. There are only there's only 12 other states that do not have online voter registration. It is secure, it works. I also will work to expand access to vote by mail to all Texans. It's something many other states have, including the liberal bastion of Arizona. It is something that helps ensure that every single voter can have their voice be heard and be informed at the polls.
Thank you. Okay, the next question. Several bills on criminal justice were introduced but not enacted during the last legislative session. What issues would you like to see addressed in the state's criminal justice system during the next session? Ms. Weiner.
So one piece of legislation that we passed through the Texas House, but that unfortunately was dead on arrival in the Senate, was decriminalizing possession of low levels of marijuana. And that's something that's really important because it impacts a lot of our young people, again, disproportionately our young people of color. That's something I think we can get over the finish line next session, but that's just the start of the work. We need to mandate implicit bias training for all law enforcement. We need to end arrests for low-level crimes when they are not necessary. That's also legislation that narrowly failed passing the House next session. And we need to make sure that we have strong use of force standards for our law enforcement. A Texas State student, Justin Howell, was shot in the head with less lethal munition at protests in Austin. Austin PD has noted that they hit the wrong person. I am working on legislation right now to ban the use of these less lethal munitions in crowd control situations. They are not designed for it. And we have seen too many young folks have life-altering consequences from their improper use.
Thank you. Ms. Isaac.
We need bail reform. Bail should be set at risk, not riches. And we also need to make sure that we fund the police. My opponent likes to talk about the protesters that were hurt during protests, but I've never heard her talk about our police officers that actually were injured during the protests. We must keep our borders safe and fund border security. My opponent wants to defund border security. I have hit over 6,000 doors and people are worried about their safety. My opponent voted against a bill that would protect boys and girls from sex trafficking and against the school safety bill. I will fight to keep our schools and our communities safe.
Thank you. Next question. After the 2020 census, congressional and state legislative districts will be redrawn. What process do you support to ensure fair representation? Ms. Isaac?
Unfortunately, there is not a perfect process for redistricting. However, I definitely trust a democratically elected official more than I would a board appointed official that is answers to no one. Everyone has an agenda. The board would be appointed by someone with an agenda, at least the way that redistricting is done now. They are conducted, they have multiple checks and balances, for instance, voters and the courts. You know, when the Democrats were in control for years, we never heard anything about this. But now that the Republicans are in control, now they want to change the rules. This is nothing but politics.
Thank you, Ms. Weiner.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to have to take a second to address a couple things. One is, yes, I voted against legislation that was a power grab by our indicted Attorney General Ken Paxton to take the ability to prosecute human trafficking cases from our local DAs and hold that himself, despite the fact that that office had very little track record of successfully pursuing those cases. I also voted against legislation to allow an unlimited number of armed teachers on our schools. I stand by both those votes. 100%. They were the right thing to do. Regarding redistricting, we need an independent process, and my opponent is correct. Both Democrats and Republicans have a history of gerrymandering, which is clearly why we need a new system that puts the voters first and not the politicians. So I will support an independent redistricting process. We cannot enact that in time before the next redistricting. But what I can promise you next session is I will fight to make sure that Hays County's communities of interest, our school districts, our cities stay whole and aren't chopped up like they are now. San Marcos has some of the most egregious district lines in the nation, and I am going to do everything I can to keep that from happening again.
Thank you. The next question, what is your position regarding local budgetary issues concerning law enforcement and related mental health services? Ms. Weiner.
The legislature's job is to set the rules by which our cities and our counties operate under. It is not to micromanage their budgets. So I will continue to support my local elected officials as they work through these issues. At the state level, we're going to work to set minimum use of force standards, and we're going to work to set some minimum accountability standards. But I am not going to support us trying to create arbitrary rules around their budget decisions. I trust you, the voters who are electing your city and county representatives, to put people there who you think are doing a good job. I also will say I really admire some of the creative work that our local electeds are doing to think about public safety in new and creative ways. Our law enforcement officers are not equipped to respond to mental health calls in general. Some of our cities do have special mental health officers, but generally just one or two, not enough to respond to all the calls they get. So we have to think of public safety in a holistic way. We can't think of it just in black and white terms. And I'm really disappointed to see the way this issue has been politicized for this election cycle, because this was a bipartisan issue last session.
Thank you. Ms. Isaac.
I believe that the state and local government should work with churches and nonprofits to help expand medical health resources to people. A good example of this working well is CASA, where the government and nonprofits work together for the need of our community. I also want to work to expand mental health resources to our students, but we need to make sure that we fully fund the police and keep our communities safe.
Thank you. The next questions we have were created by the community based on issues and concerns of theirs. What is your position on government assistance for small businesses and people who have lost their jobs during this economic crisis? Ms. Isaac.
The number one issue that I'm hearing from voters when I am at the door is property taxes. Property taxes are out of control. They are hurting our working families and our seniors. I want to implement a spending cap at the state level of population plus inflation and use remaining revenue to buy down the school maintenance and operations taxes. That's about 40 to 50% of the taxes that you pay. If we do this, your tax bill will go down every year. Experts say that we can pay this off in 10 to 12 years. This would also get rid of the problem with Robin Hood, which takes from every school district in House District 45.
Thank you. Ms. Weiner?
I apologize. Can you repeat the question? I lost what the original.
What is your position on government assistance for small businesses and people who have lost their jobs during the economic crisis?
Yeah, thank you so much, Dorothy, for repeating that. One of the things we've learned during this pandemic is that our social safety net here in Texas is broken quite fundamentally. Our Texas Workforce Commission was operating off a server set in the 90s to process unemployment claims, which resulted in dramatic backlogs. Now, we had an unanticipated number of claims come in at once, but it was heightened because we hadn't invested in our social safety net to make sure those systems work. Now, my office helped hundreds of House District 45 residents go through that unemployment claims process, and through that learned a lot of the holes in the system. So I'm going to work to try and rebuild that system. We also right now need to be looking at rental assistance and mortgage assistance to keep folks in their homes. And quite frankly, it is not good for our economy to have a bunch of Texans suddenly homeless, or to have a whole bunch of folks have to sell their homes under duress. That's how you turn a recession into a depression, which is not the direction we want to go. We also do need to work on property tax issues, and the best way to do that is to fund our school property, or to fund our schools, because if the state doesn't pay its fair share, homeowners are going to pay it instead.
Speaking of that, property tax reform in 2019 did not solve all school funding issues, particularly for small rural districts, including here in Blanco County. If property taxes are cut, please discuss your position on using general revenue funds. First, Ms. Weiner.
The state needs to pay its fair share for public schools. I am a public school graduate here in Texas. The state paid for 60% of the cost of my education. Right before I took office, it was down to 38%, the state share. Where did the difference come from? Property taxes. That's why folks are feeling this in their wallet. A lot of the blame gets cast onto our cities and our counties, but it really is our school districts being put between a rock and a hard place. So last session, you know, like, as I mentioned, we put $11.6 billion into our public school system. That brought the state share up to 45%. It is progress, but it is not all the way there. And my biggest worry next session is that, you know, conservative extremists will come in, say we have to cut the budget dramatically to try and not tap into the rainy day fund, and that we will have the same experience that we had with our 2011 cuts, where we set our schools back to zero. I am going to fight to defend our public education funds. I am willing to use the rainy day fund to do that, because our schools are that important. We cannot balance the budget on the backs of our school children.
Thank you. Ms. Isaac.
Yes, so my opponent voted at least 9 times to raise taxes and fees and against property tax relief. And I am committed to helping homeowners with their property taxes. Like I said, my plan earlier, I want to enact a spending cap at the state level of population plus inflation, and use the remaining revenue to buy down the school maintenance and operations taxes. That would actually cut our property taxes. Our property taxes would go down every year. That's about 40 to 50% of your tax bill. This would also alleviate the problem of Robin Hood. I have a plan to do this.
Thank you. The next question, please discuss your views on women's health and reproductive rights issues. Ms. Isaac.
Yes, I do support women's health. My opponent is trying to paint me as someone who does not support women's health, because I do not support our tax dollars funding abortions. Abortions are not healthcare. My opponent says that abortions are essential, and she advocates to take away personal protection equipment from our healthcare professionals on the front line so that abortion clinics can continue to perform abortions. I will not put the safety and well-being of our healthcare professionals at risk.
Ms. Weiner?
I guess I get to do a lot of rebuttals tonight. I absolutely opposed our, again, indicted Attorney General Ken Paxton, who, by the way, endorsed my opponent in the primary when he used the governor's order to try and shut down non-essential medical procedures, when he tried to use that as a way to attack women's access to abortion services. Now, if there is anything that is a time-sensitive procedure, it is abortion, and it was a ridiculous power grab and using a crisis to make a political statement. It was shameful. He was losing that in court when the governor lifted the order. I've been attacked on mail for this by some folks who support my opponent, but I'm going to say it again. I am unapologetically pro-choice. I trust you to make the best decision for yourself. And if you have made the decision to seek an abortion, I want that abortion to be safe. I want it to be accessible, and I want it to be affordable. And that is what I will continue to fight for in the Texas House, regardless of any scare rhetoric that comes from the other side. I will say it is very unfortunate as a young mom to see folks try to imply that I don't care about children.
Thank you. The next question, what is your position on the role of state government in regulating the educational environment of LGBTQ students? Discuss any legislation you would support or oppose in this area. Ms. Weiner.
Yeah. I am a founding member of the Texas House LGBTQ caucus, and am one of 5 out members in the legislature. And as someone who grew up bisexual and understands the pressures that keep someone in the closet, could you mute yourself if you're going to talk, please? Thank you. As someone who understands those pressures, I know how important it is that our LGBTQ youth feel affirmed and safe in their learning environments. You know, I chose to keep the fact that I was bisexual a secret for years. Came out to a friend when I was 16, didn't come out to anybody else for a decade. And that's because the world didn't feel safe. I want our LGBTQ youth to feel affirmed. I'm very supportive of some of the moves our school districts are doing right now following recent Supreme Court decisions to affirm LGBTQ protections for all of their youth. I will fight any return of the bathroom bill, and I would like to see our sex education and reproductive health education include the existence of LGBTQ folks.
Thank you. Ms. Isaac?
I believe that all students should be treated with dignity. I do believe we need to keep left-wing dogma out of our schools. I've knocked on around 6,000 doors, and the things that I'm hearing at the door that are important to voters in this district are property taxes and keeping our safe communities. Like I said, my opponent wants to defund border security. She has voted against keeping boys and girls safe from sex traffickers. She voted against a school safety bill. I will fight to make sure that our schools and our communities that are safe, and I will fight property taxes.
Thank you. I would now like to invite the candidates to provide a closing statement, beginning with Ms. Isaac.
Hi, I've been involved in our community for 15 years. I believe that nonprofits and churches do a much better job of keeping our neighbors, of taking care of our neighbors than government. That's why I have volunteered on the Dripping Springs Food Pantry Board for over 10 years, feeding over 100 hungry families a week. We are blessed to live in the greatest state in the greatest nation, but we must keep Texas free from gangs and drug cartels, human traffickers crossing our border, free from business crushing regulations, free from gun grabbing politicians, free from leftist dogma in our schools, and free from tax and spend politicians who want to transform our state. Keep Texas free. Thank you, and vote Carrie Isaac for state representative.
Thank you, Ms. Weiner.
So I am your state representative right now, and I have spent my first term in office fighting for each and every Texan and each and every person in House District 45, and I've done it well. That's something I will continue doing when I am reelected to the House. You know, I want for my family what I believe all Texans want. I want my daughter to get to go to great public schools. I want her to have access to affordable health care. I want her to grow up enjoying the same beautiful hill country that I did as a child. And I want her to be treated with dignity and respect by everyone in her community. Y'all, times are tough. Texans have got to be tough too. We have lost over 16,000 of our neighbors to COVID-19, a fact that was exacerbated by poor leadership at our state level, leadership that was driven more by dogma than what actually works on the ground. Now, I can tell y'all this, I am someone who will do what works and will do what works again and again and again. I will put the interests of Texans over ideology. Vote Aaron Sweener for Texas House.
Thank you. That concludes tonight's candidate forums. Thank you to Carrie Isaac and to Aaron Zwiener for sharing valuable information to empower voters. And thank you to the audience. By being here, you're demonstrating your dedication to being an informed Texas voter. Community questions that could not be addressed this evening will be submitted by the League to the candidates for their response on either their campaign website, their Facebook page, or any other manner deemed appropriate by their campaigns. As we previously mentioned, recordings of tonight's forum can be found on the Hays County League website, lwvhaysco.com. Please look out for your audience and candidate feedback surveys. We want to know what's important to you so that we can do better at all future events. Have a wonderful evening. Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.